Santiago had always believed that Christmas was just another day. But sitting alone on a cold bench in the Alhambra Gardens, watching snowflakes drift through the amber glow of streetlights, he realized how wrong he'd been. Christmas wasn't just another day. It was the day his mother's voice would never again whisper his name. It was a day the world kept celebrating while his had quietly shattered. The call had come that morning. Brief, clinical, final. His mother had passed away in her sleep back in their hometown, hours away from Granada. Santiago had stood in his apartment. Phone still pressed his ear long after the line went dead, unable to move or think or feel anything but the overwhelming weight of being utterly alone. No siblings, no father who'd stayed. Just him and a lifetime of memories that now felt impossibly distant. He left his apartment without thinking, walked through the snowy streets until his feet went numb, and somehow ended up here. The gardens were nearly empty. Families hurried past with wrapped presents and warm laughter, their voices fading into the winter air. Santiago pulled his jacket tighter and stared at his hands, wondering how life could just stop for one person while everyone else kept moving forward like nothing had changed. "Are you sad?" The voice was small, curious, innocent in a way that made Santiago's throat tighten. He looked up to find a little boy standing a few feet away, bundled in a puffy red coat with a striped scarf wrapped around his neck. The kid couldn't have been more than 5, with dark curly hair and eyes that seemed far too wise for someone so young. Santiago tried to smile, but his face wouldn't cooperate. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess I am." The boy stepped closer, tilting his head like he was thinking very hard about something important. "Why are you sad? Did someone take your toy?" Despite everything, Santiago felt the faintest pull at the corner of his mouth. "No, nothing like that." "Then what happened?" Santiago hesitated. How do you explain loss to a child? How do you put into words a feeling of being untethered from the only person who'd ever made you feel like you belonged somewhere? "My mom," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's gone." The boy's eyes widened with understanding that seemed far beyond his years. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with the kind of matter-of-fact problem-solving only a child could manage, he said, "You can borrow my mom if you want. She gives really good hugs, and she made cookies today." Santiago blinked, caught completely off guard. "I what?" "My mom," the boy repeated, like it was the most obvious solution in the world. "She's really nice. And you look like you need a mom right now." Before Santiago could respond, a woman's voice called out from somewhere behind them. "Leo, there you are. I told you to stay close." Santiago looked up as a woman hurried toward them, her breath forming little clouds in the cold air. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe around his age, with kind eyes and flowers still dusting the sleeve of her coat. When she reached them, she put a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, her expression shifting from relief to concern as she noticed Santiago. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "Leo has a habit of wandering off when something catches his attention. I hope he wasn't bothering you." "He wasn't," Santiago said, his voice still rough. "He was just keeping me company." Leo tugged on his mother's coat. "Mama, this man is sad because his mom is gone. I told him he could borrow you." The woman's face softened immediately, her eyes meeting Santiago's with compassion that made him look away. She crouched down beside her son. "That was very kind of you, sweetheart." Then she looked back at Santiago. "I'm Valeria, and I'm truly sorry for your loss." Santiago nodded, not trusting himself to speak. There was something about the genuine warmth in her voice, the way she didn't rush past his pain with empty platitudes, that made the ache in his chest feel just a little more bearable. "Are you alone tonight?" she asked gently. He nodded again. Valeria glanced at Leo, then back at Santiago. "Look, I know we just met, and this might sound strange, but no one should be alone on Christmas Eve. We're heading home now to have dinner. It's nothing fancy, just the two of us and too much food like always. Would you want to join us?" Santiago opened his mouth to decline, to say he couldn't impose, to retreat back into the familiar safety of isolation. But something in Leo's hopeful expression and Valeria's patient kindness stopped him. Maybe it was the exhaustion of grief. Maybe it was a desperate need to not spend this night alone in his empty apartment. Maybe it was just that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be invited into someone's life. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure," Valeria said, standing up and offering him a small smile. "Come on, let's get you somewhere warm." Their apartment was small and lived in, with mismatched furniture and drawings taped to the walls. It smelled like cinnamon and pine from the modest tree in the corner, decorated with homemade ornaments and twinkling lights. Santiago stood awkwardly in the doorway until Leo grabbed his hand and pulled him inside. "You can sit here," Leo announced, patting the couch. "This is the best spot. You can see the tree and the kitchen." Valeria laughed softly as she hung up her coat. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll get dinner ready." "Leo, why don't you show our guests your drawings?" What followed was the strangest, most unexpected evening Santiago had experienced in years. Leo showed him crayon masterpieces of dragons and spaceships while Valeria moved around the small kitchen, heating up food and humming quietly to herself. They ate at a table barely big enough for three, passing dishes and sharing stories. Valeria told him about her bakery, how she'd inherited it from her grandmother, and how it kept her and Leo afloat. Leo chattered about his favorite dinosaurs and how he wanted to be an astronaut chef when he grew up. Santiago found himself talking, too, telling him about his work as a video game designer, about the worlds he built on screens, about how his mother used to play the simple games he made as a kid, even though she never really understood them. When his voice cracked, Valeria simply reached across the table and squeezed his hand. No words, just presence. After dinner, Leo insisted on showing Santiago his room, complete with a tour of every toy and book. When the little boy finally started yawning, Valeria appeared in the doorway. "Bedtime, Mijo," she said gently. Leo looked at Santiago with sleepy, serious eyes. "Will you come back so I can see you again?" Santiago's throat felt tight again, but in a different way. "If your mom says it's okay." "Of course it's okay," Valeria said softly. After Leo was tucked in, Santiago and Valeria sat on the couch with cups of tea, the apartment quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. She didn't push him to talk, didn't fill the silence with meaningless chatter. She just sat with him, and somehow that was everything. "Thank you," Santiago finally said, "for tonight, for letting a stranger into your home." Valeria smiled. Leo has good instincts about people. And honestly, I think we all needed this tonight. In the weeks that followed, Santiago kept coming back. At first, it was just occasional visits, stopping by the bakery to say hello or meeting them at the park. But gradually, he became part of their routine. He'd help Valeria close up the shop, stay for dinner, play elaborate make-believe games with Leo, where they fought imaginary monsters or explored distant planets. Valeria's presence was steady, comforting in a way he hadn't known he needed. She listened when he talked about his mother, shared her own story of losing her husband in a car accident 3 years ago, and somehow made grief feel less isolating. They'd sit up late after Leo fell asleep, talking about dreams and fears and the strange ways life reshapes itself around loss. Santiago started creating a special video game in his spare time, a whimsical adventure featuring a brave little baker and his dinosaur friend. He'd test levels with Leo, watching the boy's face light up with pure joy. He'd never built anything that felt more important than making this child smile. One evening, as Santiago helped clean up after dinner, Valeria turned to him with flour on her cheek and warmth in her eyes. "You know," she said quietly, "I haven't seen Leo this happy since before his father died. And honestly, I haven't felt this much like myself in a long time either." Santiago reached out, gently brushing the flour from her face. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost. A reason to look forward to tomorrow." She leaned into his touch, and in that small, quiet moment, something shifted. The space between them, once filled with shared grief and cautious friendship, became something tender and new. When they kissed, it felt like coming home to a place he'd never been before. As winter melted into spring, and spring into summer, Santiago's life transformed. He spent more time at the bakery, learning to knead dough and decorate cakes, while Leo helped by sneaking frosting. He cut back on late nights at the office, choosing instead to have dinner with his new family, to read bedtime stories, to be present for the small, beautiful moments that made up a life. By the time fall arrived, Santiago had moved in. Leo had started calling him Papa Santiago with a casualness that made Santiago's eyes sting with grateful tears. They fell into rhythms together, the three of them, building something neither forced nor fragile but simply real. When Christmas Eve came around again, they bundled up and walked to the Alhambra Gardens as snow began to fall. Santiago led them to the bench where he'd sat a year ago, broken and alone. Leo climbed up onto the bench, looking around like he was searching for something. "Is this where we met you?" he asked. "It is," Santiago said, sitting down and pulling the boy onto his lap. Valeria sat beside them, her hand finding his. Leo was quiet for a moment, then looked up at Santiago with those impossibly wise eyes. "I'm glad I lent you my mama," he said seriously, "because now you're not sad anymore and we have the best family." Santiago wrapped his arms around the boy, looking over at Valeria, who had tears in her eyes. "You're right," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We have the best family." As they sat there together, watching snow dust the ancient gardens in white, Santiago thought about his mother. He thought about how she'd always told him that life had a way of bringing you what you needed when you needed it most. He'd never believed her, had always thought that sounded like wishful thinking. But sitting here with Leo's warmth against his chest and Valeria's hand in his, he understood. Love didn't erase grief. It didn't fix what was broken or bring back what was lost. But it made space for something new. It turned lonely benches into places of belonging. It transformed strangers into family. It gave you a reason to believe that even after the worst day of your life, there could still be beautiful days ahead. "Merry Christmas," Valeria whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "Merry Christmas," Santiago whispered back, holding tight to the miracle he never saw coming. The miracle of a small boy with too much compassion, a woman with enough room in her heart for someone else's pain, and a second chance at family when he thought all his chances were gone. The snow kept falling, soft and silent, covering the world in fresh possibility.
Thank you for watching. Your support means the world. Keep cheering us on and stay tuned for more stories.